Thank you so much, David and Teresa, for helping with everything. And thank you all to come and listen to me this morning. I prepare a talk with a provocative title. I hope the title is the talk actually makes justice to the title. I was looking at the title I gave and said, oh my God, what do I say now? But it is prepared because I want to speak about three things. One is the vision that I have for Loyola, and because I have been speaking about it for some time with you, I don't want to say a lot, but I do want to tell you why, how did I come to this? And so part of the talk is a bit from my research in the past, so you get an idea of what I did and how I got to this conclusion. And part of the talk is really about the vision. So I'm going to share the screen. And the other thing is my internet is not great. And so I have to say this to you, Teresa, David, and Emily, and we tried to really fix this before and we got echo. And so if I freeze, just be patient, I'll be back. This is how it's going to be, all right? So let me share the screen so we have this presentation for you. Okay, I hope you can see the screen. Let me see. David, can you give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the slide? Okay.
Thumbs up, we can see it.
Perfect. My topic, as I said, is about the vision for the future and my research. And as the title indicates, I have done research in two fields. One is blindness, and the other is how the brain experiences beauty. And I wanted to combine both in this particular presentation. So let me start. Okay, so the starting point is this. Higher ed really is facing a major trust crisis, either because of the high tuitions that cause debt among students, either because in some cases, students study for 40 years and then they don't have a job at the end of the line, or because in some respects, academia is being perceived as detached from society. Higher education is not always viewed in the public with great esteem because of this problem. And so the question that we need to ask is, how do we fix this? And I begin this answer by looking at Loyola mission and vision. So as you can see, I copy a piece of the website from the Loyola University, the piece of mission and vision. And the two things I want to highlight is expand knowledge for the service of humanity. And there is more, of course, the vision is more complex of that, but I don't want to make it overly complex. We are a research university in addition to educating and forming new students. And we want to create knowledge that will help people that are underprivileged in many reasons. So this brings to a vision for the future. And the vision for the future means let the university or part of the endeavors of the university focus on the real problems facing the world, use its research and its education and its outreach to solve these problems. Now, these problems are many and complex. So here are some examples that we can consider, and there are many more examples. So violence, environmental justice, poverty, racism, and I can go on and on and on. Those problems are both national, and so I had included for violence and for racism examples from recent news, the killing of George Floyd and the storming of the Capitol. But there are other examples. So I have here my laser pointer. Poverty, this image of poverty I took from my home country, the one where I was born, Brazil. So it's global. And the issue of environmental justice is even in places where there are resources. For example, this is a picture taken from a river in Nepal. Sometimes they cannot use it because of poverty and injustices in this place. So we want to focus on this. And the problem is, these problems are really complex. And let me give you an example. So let me pick racism as an example to illustrate how complex. So here is a graph of unemployment rates of Black and white Americans since 2007 until now. The unemployment rate goes up and down. So remember, after 2008 crisis, we had a higher unemployment rate, and now because of COVID, we have another spike, but it is not equal. The unemployment rate for Blacks is higher by far from those of people coming from white families. And so one big component of racism clearly is economic. But if I continue, you'll see that there are others, right? So for example, here is a series of health conditions divided by ethnic groups. So asthma, diabetes, heart disease, and I can go on. There are many others that I could have included in this slide, but look at the peaks. So for example, for asthma, the larger numbers are in American Indians and Alaska Natives, followed by Blacks. If I go to diabetes, same thing, larger number American Indians, Alaska Natives, followed by Blacks. When we go to heart disease, once again. So you could say racism is not just economic, it's also an issue of equity of health across the country. And I can continue and say more, because my field of study is cognitive psychology, cognitive neuroscience. And recently studies have shown that it's possible that there is a neural mechanism of this, or there is a psychological mechanism for racism. So if you want to tackle racism, you would actually have to consider the psychology of racism. So this slide is just an example. So there were studies of unconscious bias, those biases that you are not really aware of, and people that have large amounts of unconscious bias toward races were then imaged in neuroscans and found that the zone of the amygdala of their brains light up much more than other people when seeing pictures that involve racism. So racism, such as you could say, simple word, needs to be tackled at the economic, at the health, at the psychological, and I can go more, the legal, sociological perspectives. And this is what we are trying to say is we need to consider all those dimensions to tackle complex problems. So this is about the vision, and I will come back to this at the end, but I wanted to tell you how this came to my head. Why did I learn that this vision is what we need when we are facing real complex problems in the world? So how do we solve such complex problems? And my big part of my initial career was in the field of vision, but in this case, actually how you see and blindness. So I put here a map for you of the world in terms of prevalence of blindness. And this map really is legally blind. And you see that overall, there are regions in the world that are doing really bad. So for example, East Africa and Central Africa, the prevalence of blindness is very high, but rest of Africa is not great either. South America has great prevalence of blindness. Regions of South Asia and Asia in general have also. And of course, not surprisingly, the places that are privileged like Europe, United States, Canada, Australia do better. But even in the United States, where we have better conditions, there are 1 million people among us that are legally blind. So 1 in every 300 people or so that we see are legally blind. And so blindness is a really major problem. And the question is, can we find a solution. Can we fix it? Can we find a way for people who lose their sight to see again? So I wanted to not just have numbers for you. I had a little video, hopefully we're going to work, of a person. This person is important because it was the first person to receive the solution I'm going to tell you about. But I want you to perceive that this is not just numbers, it's a real deep human problem. So let me put the video and then continue.
Me and Lisa have been together since high school, been married for the last 34 years. A couple years after we got married, Lisa started experiencing trouble with her eyes, seeing at night, and she went to a few doctors and ran into a bunch of different specialists, and then they took them a couple years and they diagnosed her with retinitis pigmentosa. And since then we've been just watching and hoping that there was something that would come along to help her with her eye disease, and found this on the internet, and it's just been a life-changing experience.
Okay, so the Kuliks, of course, are a family like any of ours. They have grandkids, they have children, and I didn't put the entire video. Video is longer because of time, but you know, that's the thing she wants most. And I will show you Lisa Kulik a little later. She wants to see her grandkids, you know, her children, and she can't. It's a deep human problem. So the disease she has is actually the disease that causes the most blindness in our country, in Western Europe. It's a genetic disease, and just to give you an idea, so let me put the laser pointer again so you can see. The eye on the left is a normal eye. This is a fundus retina scan. So you're just looking at the back of the eye, and you can see it's very clean. And when you look at the eye of a person with retinitis pigmentosa, you see those black spots, and those are consequence of necrosis. Cells are dying, and I'll tell you in a moment which cells are dying. But it's interesting because it starts dying from the periphery. You can see around, and slowly inches inward, and eventually covers the entire retina, and the person goes blind. So if you capture this early in the process, so this is what the left is what a person with normal sight will see. The right is what a person with retinitis pigmentosa in intermediate stages will see. Nothing in the periphery, just the middle. And this simply keeps going inwards until eventually the person sees nothing. So this is the idea. So the question is, can we understand this disease and then find a solution? So before I go there, here is how we see in a simplistic way. So light comes from, in this cartoon, light comes from the left. There is a lens that focuses the image on the back of the eye in the tissue called retina. So this is, and the retina really captures the image. So this is the idea. So the eye is really like a camera, but as I'll see in a moment, is an intelligent camera. So here is the eye again. And now what we are doing in this figure, I am taking the retina and expanding it. And you will see it's a network of cells. And here is even in B, you have even more expansion. So it's a real network of cells. The cells on the top are called the photoreceptors. They are simply light sensing devices. When light reaches them, they produce an electrical signal, and the rest of the retina is like a microprocessor, like what you think there is in a computer. Processes the information, and eventually the information goes to the rest of the brain. So this is how the retina works. And what happens in retinitis pigmentosa, which is the disease that we're talking about, is that the light sensitive cells start dying. So, and this is a genetic condition, as I said before. So here is a normal retina. The green on the top is the light sensitive cells, the photoreceptors. The reds are other cells that are like this microprocessor. The cells in the bottom are the cells sending the information to the brain. And what happens is, with the disease, the green cells disappear. And the rest of the retina, so the reds, have a little bit of modification, but they remain alive. So the retina remains alive. The problem is that the light sensing cells disappear. That's why you go blind. You simply cannot sense light. That's basically the idea. So we thought the following: what if we could fool the retina that there was light by talking directly to the output cells rather than putting light? That is the trick we imagined. And it's easier said than done because the project itself took more than 20 years to complete, but that was the idea. So let me show you. Here is how we would do. We would set the blind person with glasses, and in the glasses we would fit, let me put the laser pointer again, hopefully I can. Oh. Okay, in the glasses we'll put a camera. The camera would then, sorry, I'm going to make my image a little easier to see. The camera would then transmit the information. So this is the wireless transmission to an implant that is in the eye. That implant, through an electronic receiver, would then apply electrical current directly to the cells in the eye. Of course, there is a processor that, in fact, processes the image so that sort of bypasses the microchip that the retina has in order to activate the live cells correctly. So this is basically what this idea is. And here it is in more detail. So imagine this person is a blind person looking at a chart, and the person is seeing the letter E. The light comes to the camera in the goggles and the spectacles. The camera sends a signal to the eye, and the receiver picks up the signal. So here is the implant. The implant is tucked to the retina. And if you look in more detail in the bottom, the idea is that the electrical currents given to the cells mimic the letter E. So the letter E was in the image. The camera plus the processor process this for the implant, and the implant then says to the cells, you fire in this way, and this is sent to the brain, who then says, we have a letter E. So this is basically the idea. Of course, this is a much more complicated process than it's easier said than done. But that's what we worked over many years. So let me continue with the presentation. So here is a picture of a real retina of a real person, taken the same way as before, now with the electrical array in the retina. So the black spots are the electrical array. They are in the retina. This is a blind person. So the person is now have this implanted. Remember, there is goggles, there is information sent to the electrical array, and this is how the person is supposed to see again. So I am going to show you now a video of before and after the operation, in which Lisa Kulik was the first person who received this implant. So this is FDA approved. You can see there from the title. So we got the FDA approval. We implanted this. She was the first, and then there were, I think in the world, there is about 500 people with this device now. But I just wanted you to see what she can see and how this has transformed her life. So let me put that there for you.
The device works as such. The camera here sends the information to this video processing unit, and both power and data are then sent back up to this coil, which sends it into the implant. And so effectively a blind person is wirelessly hooked up to this camera in the glasses. You might be seeing
seeing flashes, lines.
Oh, great.
Flashing all around.
Wow, that's great.
And dots.
How big are the dots?
Tiny pinhole.
She just reported it was amazing. She could see spots of light already on the very first day of activating. Even she could see lines when we were activating them. She's ahead of expectations. She's just a great patient. The surgery went very well. It's a very good implant. So everything is headed in the right direction and way ahead of our expectations.
So far I've seen the full moon on Friday the 13th. I've seen the fireworks on the 4th. I've been able to walk down the sidewalk, being able to see contrasts in the street, the asphalt, the darker color, and the grass. And I even saw an obstacle. I wasn't sure what it was, but I did stop and realized I was told it was a bush in front of me, but I could tell there was something there. It was a new world opening up to me.
One of the reasons why USC has been able to accomplish this is because we've got a very close collaboration between a School of Medicine, a Department of Ophthalmology, a clinic, and a School of Engineering. All of those come together in creating this novel artificial retinal implant, which we can then put in people and help improve their lives.
So as you can see, the result, the reason this was possible, and I'll hammer this point more and more, is because we work as a team that had different skills, and I'll emphasize the skills in a moment. It is impossible for any of us to do this alone. This gentleman in front of you is Dr. Mark Humayun, who is the surgeon in the team, let me put it, and he received the National Medal of Technology Innovation for this project. It was a project that involved 30 different groups working together, 30 different sets of expertises. He's a very close friend of mine. One of these days, I'll invite him to Loyola, and you can have him give a presentation himself. And so it's a great result. It was a fruit of, as I said, many years. Now, the point again I want to say is that this would not be possible if we were not truly interdisciplinary in our efforts. So the disciplines that are involved here are highlighted now. So computer science was important because we needed to process the images to bring it to the retina. Material sciences was important because we needed to construct the electrical array in a way that was conforming to the shape of the retina and materials that were not toxic. Talking of toxicity, there is rejection by the body of anything that you implant, so biologists needed to be there. Electrical engineers needed to be working with us for two reasons. One, to build the circuitry, but also you need to understand things like power. So if you put too much current, you fry the retina. If you put too little current, you don't stimulate. So you need to be very careful about this. And of course, medicine and surgery was important. Now, when Lisa started seeing, we needed to know what she saw. And that's the time we actually brought a psychologist to the team. So psychology became part of our team, and he began testing what is that Lisa saw. And those images that you saw with the 4th of July fireworks and the bush and the moon were all determined with precise psychological method. Of course, I was part of the team too, and I did not put myself yet, but I will. I'll put it right now. So here is me at 18. And please don't tell anybody, but I had long hair, long beard, and I was a future neuroengineering information. So any of you students, look, if I can get from there to here, you have hope. So continue on. So I want to, okay, so this is the point. A very complex problem, a very difficult problem, needs people from different disciplines to work together to solve it. Otherwise, we won't solve it. And so I want to give you a second example from my more recent work. And let me put that for you. So this is me at 18, and this is me now. In this particular case, I'm an old neuroengineering meditator, and my cat, as you can see, for some reason, and when I meditate, my cat loves to come with me. Meditation doesn't mean I reach nirvana. I'm still trying to, but it's going to be a long way. But I decided, and this happens to scientists when they become older, that to tackle a problem that people have tried before and it was difficult. And the issue is the question of what is beauty. And in particular, related to the first question, could a blind person perceive beauty, was something that I was curious, but I knew they could, but I wanted to understand more. So let me tell you what this research is about. And I am switching subjects, but it is for the same purpose, just to show the importance of interdisciplinarity. So beauty is a problem that has been with civilization, Western civilization, for since the ancient Greeks. In fact, the ancient Greeks believed that beauty was not something that was in our brains, but inherent to the objects themselves. And surprisingly, that notion remained true until the Renaissance, at least. Now, later on, with the Enlightenment, we began thinking differently, that beauty really is in the eye of the beholder, as we say today, and is not really about what's in the object. But there are reasons to think that there are certain things in objects that could be inherently beautiful. So artists have emphasized things like proportion, symmetry, and balance as inherent to beauty. On the other hand, we know that beauty is an issue that is culturally sensitive. We each have different tastes, and so I wanted to know, as a scientist, what is happening in the brain, and can we answer these questions that have been lingering with us for so long? So just to emphasize again, the old Greeks and all the way to the Renaissance believed that beauty was objective. Plato, in fact, had a series of forms that he believed were essential to beauty. Coming later to the Enlightenment, things change. And Hume, for example, wrote this passage that is there: beauty is no quality in things themselves. It exists merely in the mind, which contemplates them, and each mind perceives a different beauty. So this was a big dichotomy that remains unresolved. And my question really is, what does the brain have to say about it? Now, clearly, I could tackle this as a neuroscientist, as I said before, as a neuroengineer. But there is a lot more aspects to it. You just saw philosophers have been debating this for a long time, psychologists debate it. And so I mounted a team of people with different skills to work with me on this particular project. And the team had, of course, neuroscientists, and this was part of the team. The team had an actual painter. So I thought it was important to have an artist participate. And as you see in a little while, he was essential to some of the things we found. We had a psychologist, we had two musicians, two people that were interested in the perception of beauty in music. We have a computational scientist, and because beauty is culturally relevant, we even had a sociologist in the team. So all of these are part of our team, and I'm not going to talk about everything we found, just highlight a few points of importance. So let me start by the first most fundamental finding. The first most fundamental finding is that there are certain parts of the brain that seem to be dedicated to you answering a question of whether you value something, we associate high aesthetic value to something. So here is a summary, what we scientists call this a meta-analysis of 93 different articles on where people were asked, do you like this? Do you find this pleasurable and beautiful or whatever? In other words, positive appraisal. But importantly, this article contains 4 different sensory modalities. So vision, audition, gustation, so this means taste, and olfaction. So you could say, oh, I love this. And this could be something you saw, something you heard, something you tasted, or something you smell. So this is, now, this is important, and I'm not going to go over very much, because this means, as I will show you in a moment, that there is something common to all those modalities. when you say that something is, oh, I like this. And that means, therefore, automatically, that beauty is not dependent on vision. So the blind can experience it. And so this was a very simple question I asked, but I need to justify why I had this in my title, I guess. But it is important. Beauty is something that the brain does, depends on sensory inputs, but the circuitry that does it is independent on the sensory input. Now, for example, in vision, if you ask what is activate, so these are scans of the brain. So every one of the studies scanned the brain, so we know which areas was activated when the person said, I like it, right? And so this, the brains are the things in gray, and the yellow regions are the things that are the areas activated. Now, if you show a painting that you like a lot, some things are activated, for example, the visual cortex. So let me put my laser pointer. So the visual cortex, I hope you can see the laser pointer here. The visual cortex is always going to be activated when you see something, because that's what the visual cortex does, is help you with see, right? That doesn't mean you like that something. That means simply you saw it, right? But there are areas of the brain that respond always to the question, did you like it? And so let me show you. Oh, I'm sorry, I went too fast. So for example, the orbitofrontal cortex, or OFC, which is a part in the front, is common. Basically every time you are asked if you like something, that area participates. The anterior insula, you can see there circle, is also common. It does not matter whether you do it with your eye, with your ears, with your nose, or your mouth, the anterior insula is going to be part. So there are parts of the brain that are devoted to liking something, and other parts that are devoted to processing whatever is. So the parts of the brain that are involved in liking something, let me see here, are those that I put in the scheme, but they are, here is summarizing, so of course. So the orbitofrontal cortex participates when you like something. The anterior insula, as I mentioned before, and the ventral basal ganglia. And there is another area which I won't talk a lot today, the rostral cingulate, but all of those 4 areas seem to participate. The orbitofrontal cortex is important for many reasons, but one of them is it's where the senses converge. So information from the eye, from the ears, from the nose, from the mouth is one of the areas that capture all this information. So and so therefore it does not matter the sensory modality. It's sort of an integration area. The anterior insula was one of the most strange things found in this research, because the anterior insula is typically related to your gut. It receives information from, say, the gut and the apparatus in the digestive system. In retrospect, it makes sense, because our ancestors did not have a visual system or auditory system like ours. Their important thing in nature was to eat, and among other things, and they needed input from the anterior insula, a more visceral input than they needed from other areas. And so that makes sense evolutionarily, but it continues with us. And it is actually the reason for why when we see something and you say, I like this, why we say we have a gut feeling, because in fact it goes from the gut to the brain almost directly. Now, the more important is that anterior insula is involved in motivation. So for example, you might like something, so you look at an apple and you say, this apple is good. But if you're not hungry, you're not going to eat the apples. So the anterior insula provides the motivation for the action. Finally, the ventral basal ganglia is important for learning. And learning is key because if we belong to a culture, so if you are in the middle of a culture, you are going to learn the aesthetic values of that culture through that component, the ventral basal ganglia. So there is an area for sensory information, another for motivation, and another for learning that participate in this. And this is common to every time you like something. So it doesn't matter if you do it to your eyes, to your nose, to your ears. And so this is why these three areas are so important. Now, I always joke because the ventral basal ganglia have other roles, and so I'm going to emphasize it. The ventral basal ganglia have been found important for fear, for love. In fact, love always makes me think that science is romantic after all, although many people would dispute that. And here it goes. Who says science isn't romantic? So the man says, "Darling, I'll never stop loving you." And she says, "But how can you be sure?" And he replies, "Tumor of the caudate nucleus." It's the area of the brain that will make you love. And so that's all you need. Sorry. Maybe that's not so romantic after all, but okay, I just had to say it. Anyway, what I'm going to do is divide two main findings. And I think this is important because it goes to the heart of the philosophical question I started this with, whether it's objective or subjective. And I want to just, I'm not going to tell you all, but this is what I'm going to focus. So the question for the sensory pathways that converge to the orbitofrontal cortex is, what are those things that we like, right? And the dominant theory, maybe some people disagree with me, is something called the processing fluency theory, that says if something in the world is processed with ease by the brain, you will tend to like it. And I will make this point so you understand. So here is, first of all, what means fluent. So in the left, there is the word example written 5 times. And it's fluent, meaning you read it with ease. And in the right, you have this fluent version. So for example, the very top one, let me put my laser pointer again, is one with low contrast. It's hard to see. And so it's this fluent. You are not processing it quickly. The one, say the third one, it's blurry. So it's hard to see again. The one in the bottom is chromatic contrast, but the contrast is low because of the colors chosen. So it's hard to see. And the other two are examples where you change the letters or you put it upside down. It's hard to read. The idea is that if you like something, if something is processed fluently by the brain will tend to like it. And this means that the brain has real state, meaning areas of the brain dedicated to processing those things. That's why it's fast. So what are examples of things that people found that the brain really has a strong capacity to do? I'll come in a moment. But so just to say to you, what is the processing fluency theory? Objects differ in fluency. I gave you the example in the previous slide, but there are many other examples. And then the brain will say, if something is processed fluently, I will like it. That's basically what it is. There are other assumptions. For the sake of time, I'll not tell them to you because it's just a little long. I mean, and we could talk about it. Examples of properties that do elicit that the brain process with ease are balance, symmetry, complexity, and others. I mean, again, the list is big. I present those because those are the things that in history of art has most emphasized. Symmetry has been a staple since the Greeks. Balance, well, in the Renaissance, that's what they most talk about, and so on, and complexity as well. Let me show you why symmetry is important and why the brain devotes a real state for symmetry. It is because there are objects of importance in the world that are symmetric, and they have social and biological value for us. Perhaps the most important one for humans would be human faces that tend to be symmetric. And so detecting symmetry becomes really important for humans. But other animals, of course, the elephant, the tiger, and plants. have all kinds of symmetry. So this is part of the biological world, and therefore brain decided this is important, I'm going to do it. I say this, evolution did it, of course, right? Here is the proof. Symmetry was important. If you present images that have all kinds of symmetry, so for example, A here on the top is symmetric, have several kinds of symmetry in that particular image. B is an image that is composed to have the same density of dots, the same statistical properties except for symmetry. And when you subtract the response of the brain for the symmetric image from the non-symmetric, you reveal areas of the brain. So here are examples that respond exclusively to symmetry. That's what they do. We have certain real estate areas, as you see, areas V3A, V4. The names don't matter because at the end it's technical, but there are areas of the brain that really care about symmetry. And so according to that theory that I mentioned before, the processing fluency theory, you would say, wow, you should like symmetry, and in fact, that's what artists have emphasized for a long time. Of course, I couldn't pass this opportunity because not only artists, but celebrities have been talking about symmetry. One of my favorite quotes come from Michael Jordan. I hit the basketball. I know it sails in a parabola, exhibiting perfect symmetry, which is interrupted by the basket. It's funny, but it's always interrupted by the basket. I love that quote. And then, of course, Amy Poehler has an even better one because she disputes Michael Jordan. She says, symmetry is pleasing, but not as sexy. Einstein is cool, but Picasso knows what I'm talking about. So I will leave that to you to decide which one you prefer. So now this is work that we did to try to evaluate. So these are the 2 papers of my group. There are more, but these are 2 papers. Work we did to try to evaluate whether in fact these 3 components appear in art in a preferential way by artists. I did mention Alim. Alim is a cognitive neuroscientist. Correa Iran is actually an artist. It was the lead author in this other paper. The et al. Contained the scientists, so they mean the paper was really a collaboration across the fields. I think they're cool. They're technical, but I hope if you want to read them, please. And I'm happy to talk about them with any of you. So we ask basically 2 questions. Do artists really bias their work for properties like balance, symmetry, and complexity? And then the other question that I will address here is if they do, say they put a lot of symmetry in their painting, do they optimize symmetry? So these are the 2 things. And here is the assumption, the perception, the processing fluency theory is a theory that applies to perceivers. So you look, if it's easy for you, you do it. But the assumption is that artists use their visual system as perceivers to produce art. And so let me tell you how we think of this. So here is the painting Guernica by Picasso. Those are actually 4 sketches he did before he painted. And so the ones on the corners. All of this is in the Museo Reina Sofia in Madrid. I highly recommend, including the main painting is there. It's a really great painting. But the goal was Picasso struggled to this. And this is what Ivan Correa Iran, the one that appears in that first author, taught us. An artist is really, you paint something and you step back and you look again and say, something is wrong here. You may not know what's wrong, but you go and you fix it, and then you look again and so on. So that means your perceptual system is being used in the process of making art. And so this is why we made that assumption. Then the other thing we needed to do is where to start. And what I'm going to show you was using portraits from the early Renaissance. The reason to do that is that portraits really started in force at the early Renaissance. So that was a good set for us as an initial set because they, it was the beginning of something. We didn't have to, there was not a lot of baggage in the analysis. And second, portraits are relatively simple in terms of analysis because if you do a landscape, there's a lot of other details you have to do. So that's what we focus. Now, this is a test of a theory. And so therefore, there was a lot of math. And so many people feel afraid of math. So I put this for you to know that if you have anxiety with math, I am going to be nice and not show you any math today because that's not the crowd that were, but there is a lot of math in this work. And I actually think that that's the real reason why the screen was painted by Greek. So anyway, so here is two results. I'm going to show you two results of the study. In this analysis, there were three types of images that were compared. One, the portraits from the early Renaissance. One was very well posed images. So this is me again. I appeared to in my own talk a couple of times. Very well posed image, very centered, very balanced on purpose. So because we wanted to know whether the artists from the Renaissance were balancing as well as they could. And then what we call spontaneous images, images that were taken without paying a lot of attention to posing or things like this. The red line is not so important. It's just a statistical something, a tool to measure balance in the image. But and so we also tried to use other kind of images. Of course, so we thought of using images from news, and we tried, for example, these, but the reaction was the computer complained of a computer virus, and so we anytime we tried these pieces, we didn't use them. The result is the graph on the bottom right. The one in red is the paintings from the Renaissance, and the number is a measure of balance. Again, there is a mathematics there I'm not going to tell you. What is interesting is two things. If you do a quick snap, the spontaneous, and that's the one in green, you can see that typical, if you open your eyes to any image in the world, your balance is not going to be especially good. And the balance in the paintings in the Renaissance is better. This is measuring imbalance. So the balance is actually better. So meaning the painters in the Renaissance truly balanced their paintings. They really went out of their way to balance their paintings. But the strange thing is the blue bar in the bottom, because it showed that they could have done better, actually. So the posed images, the one that appear on the bottom left, have much more balance than what the paintings in the Renaissance had. And that means that the Renaissance folks did not try to balance completely. And this is important. So if you look, for example, at this portrait of a lady by Uccello on the upper left, of course, that is a profile image. And why? Because it has more details about the person than a frontal image. So there is another part that is important in images, which is that information matters in paintings. And so balance could be important, but there is various variables that are competing in the mind of the artist. So this is an example. So here is balance and complexity in several different paintings by three different painters. So the red dots are by Pedro Berruguete, the blue by Antonello da Messina, and the green by Andrea del Castagno. And you can see that different painters emphasize this balance between different variables in different ways. So for example, you would say that Antonello da Messina, which is the blue, really balances painting better than the other two painters, because he had the paint, each dot is a painting, right? So its painters are balanced better. While the other two balance more poorly, but they care more about the complexity of the painting. And so this is the example. The other thing this shows, this graph is important, and I'll come back to this, is there is a lot of individuality in the choice of how you balance things. Each one of us have a different brain, and this is important, and I'll show you how perhaps this individuality arises. And so this is key to understand. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about, and I promise to go relatively quickly, I'm running out of time. So anyway, is that balance and taste are not just something that is in your brain. You know, if you are exposed to certain kind of values in your society, you will adjust to those values. You know, you are not going to just be arbitrary relative to your culture. And this important issue comes from learning. It's much more subjective than this, you know, very objective things like symmetry and balance are. So going back to our scheme of the brain, I remember we had three important things: senses, learning, and motivation. Senses was in the orbitofrontal cortex, motivation was in the insula, and learning was in the basal ganglia. And so learning allows us to adjust to culture. And so this is a more recent paper, in case you want to look. This is by Alim et al., published a couple of months ago, I think. And it's a theory for the learning of aesthetic values, in case you want to do. Of course, the key thing is learning, and it's a theory, and I go with Muhammad Ali that, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I know I'm right. And so I don't know if my theory is correct, but I know I'm right. So just bear with me on that one. I think I am going to skip this slide, mostly for time, David, if you're okay with this. But this is sort of a description of the theory. Basically, what it is we take the brain circuitries and have built a model for how those brain circuits work together. And since we are running out of time, I'm going to not speak about it.
We have Norberto, we have till noon. I know we want some time for questions, so you're in charge.
Listen, if someone has a question, I'll come back to this slide. I think it's better, and because I want to hear the questions, not just me talking. So let me skip the theory for now. Of course, I have to say, because this is a theory, after all, we have to be careful. We have to do math again. But the other thing, it is a theory for aesthetic culture, and I always wonder what would happen to artists if they live today. And so let's imagine that. And so let's imagine that the Mona Lisa was painted in 2020. And so how would Mona Lisa look? I think the Da Vinci probably will have her like this. I'm almost certain, I'm not sure, but possibly. And Michelangelo, when he painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the Adam and God, the creation of Adam image, he probably would have done this. So make sure that the hands were clean. And this one was the one that really bothered me, because of course there was a lot of lack of social distancing there. And I thought, okay, so how exactly would Da Vinci paint this one? Of course, the painting would be illegal for sure because of the lack of social distancing in the gathering, or he could have had this in Zoom. As you see, you put the others participating in the dinner by Zoom. And of course, at the end of the dinner, we'll have to clean everything up. So this will be part of the painting, but we don't know how Da Vinci will do this. So the theory, again, I'm going to skip it for now, but I will put my math, and this one, I will actually put some equations to give you some nightmares. But here are three results. And I think this is important because you understand the subjectivity of the subjective component of beauty. The first result is that there is learning in this. If you create a brain like this and you connect these parts and you create a mathematical model, the brain will learn, but the learning is complex. And so here is an example of, you would say, a baby trying to learn values. So balance weight and complexity weight are how this baby would balance this after seeing enough images in the world. So you would say that this initial portion of the curve, let me put the laser pointer, is the early part of life. So the baby is trying to get values. There is a lot to learn, and the learning is fast. Then when he gets to what you would say a more adult life, or I'm not putting, now what happens, it depends. It depends on the baby's motivations. It depends on the culture that the baby is exposed. Depends on many things. and then there is what you happen is that the baby, in this particular baby, in this model, would actually prefer to have less balance and more complexity, this particular baby, or this particular person, let's say. The interesting thing, though, is that these results are very individual. And so here is 3 different people that underwent this learning process. So this is simulations. And these 3 people ended up in different parts of the space. And in this particular case, we vary the amount of risk-taking in these 3 individuals. So green is someone that likes risk and therefore prefers complexity rather than balance in these terms. Another person that is more neutral, and another person that is really risk averse. So motivation that you have for doing things will lead you to different parts of this, what we call the neurostatic space, the possibilities of your balancing different aspects of beauty. And I just put this slide to remind you, because this thing is showing individuality. The theory shows high individuality. That's what, to me, one of the great findings of this work is that depending on who you are, you learn something else. And as an artist, you become something else. And so remember the 3 painters I put before, this is basically the thing. Then the final result I want to put, and so this will take only a short minute, is we can actually test the theory. It's not just a theory, we can do an experiment. And so we proceeded to test the theory. There is a lot of tests. I wish I had time because this is really cool. I mean, you'll find a lot of very curious things that people do. But the simplest test is to ask the question, do people learn new static values when they are exposed to it? So this was an experiment that we did. It's one of the earliest experiments we did. And what we had was people play games. So they were playing games with seeing images with dots. And basically we'll give them a reward if they guess the image we had in mind. So we didn't tell them in the beginning of the game. So they did not know if it was this or this or this or this that had the most reward, but the computer knew. And so the person who played this game, and the goal of the person was to learn to figure out how to maximize the amount of reward. And in this particular example, the maximization of reward was when the image had 253 dots. This is a bizarre thing, but that's how it was. If you select the 75, you get less reward. So you play the game and you don't know the purpose. You just play the game and eventually you get, you really figure out, oh, this is cool, I'm winning, right? But what we had done is before playing the game, we actually compare how much people like these different images. And then we repeated that after the game, and the results are here. So the gray is a comparison the average rating for images. And so what we discover, and this is pretty normal, that people really like images with a lot of dots. However, after playing the game, without noticing, they shifted their taste towards the 253 in this particular game. So this means you can actually shift a person's taste by rewarding some things and giving more value to those things. So this, and again, there are lots of very cool results. Maybe sometime I'll give you another seminar, I'll tell you these cool results. I want to stop here just with my, as I said, the main point I want to come back to the point. Remember, to do this, we did not just have neuroscientists. We have a partnership that involves artists and psychologists and sociologists to try to understand these various aspects. And so, first of all, what is the answer? We believe the answer is that the brain is both objective and subjective. That clearly learning and motivation makes you different individual and adapted to your culture, and therefore the beauty is in your eye. But there are certain things that come from evolution, things like symmetry and balance and complexity that you have no control over, that it is really objectively beautiful to you. And so the Greeks were right, and the Enlightenment people were right, if you want to say it in this way, because at the end, the brain really needs both. So to finish, the vision for the future I began in the beginning is that we need to focus on the problems that matter. I gave you two examples. The blindness was really a social problem. Beauty was more my nirvana kind of research, but both were highly complex problems. And the main message is, if you want to restore sight to the blind, if you want to understand beauty, or if you want to solve any complex and important problem, you must smash disciplinary barriers. You have to start from the question. You say, what is the problem? And then go back and say, what tools I need to try to answer. Not to start by saying, I have this tool, what problem can I solve? But going from the problem backward. And so for Loyola, we are working on these issues. So for example, we did create recently, we developed a new institute for racial justice. We are working on another entity like this, focused on violence and other problems. And we must smash these barriers. Of course, disciplines are important, but in order to tackle the complex problems and become relevant for society, my advice is we need to work as teams of people that are tackling the real complex issues in the world. And I am done, and I can take questions. Do you prefer, I probably should stop sharing, right? I think would be best. Okay. And thank you again for listening.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Ashim had emailed or had messaged me earlier with a question. And Ashim, are you still here?
Yes, he is. I can see.
Yes, I am here.
Hello, Ashim.
I am here. Yeah, yeah. You know, there are some beauties which are learned. I mean, if let's say if you see an equation that's beautiful, is it the same kind of beauty as the beauty that you see in this basic perceived senses or not? Do they excite the same part of the brain?
The answer is yes. But so that is what is interesting, Ashim. Equations, or you know, my co-author was an architect, and he could see the drawing of a room, architectural drawing of a room, and say, oh, this is beautiful. And I would look at this and say, yeah, lines. No, for me, it did not matter. Or I would say, look at this equation, because this is what I have done. And I say, it's so beautiful. And you say, yeah, scribbles, you know. So what happens is, there is one part of the work I haven't described, which is the work on expertise and learning and training. If you train really hard on certain characteristics, the brain develops new areas and real estate that, by real estate, portions of the brain that are dedicated to this. And we know that this happens even for things that look so strange. For example, a colleague of mine did an experiment in which he trained monkeys to solve tasks using paper clips. So you would bend the paper clips in different shapes and show the paper two shapes and ask the monkey, is this the same paper clip, just rotated? And of course, in the beginning, the monkey couldn't solve the problem. And after training, suddenly the monkey could tell. And later, when you record from the brain, you find a paper clip area. In other words, if that's the thing you do, you really develop portions to do it well. And so that part is the processing. So you become a mathematician, you are going to have certain circuitries to do it, but then that feeds to the value area. If those things are valuable to you, you know, if equations are valuable to you, those areas of the brain that I was talking about get lightened up, because you say I see a beautiful equation, and those areas of the brain would then say it's beautiful. You follow what I'm saying? I'm not sure if you got frozen, but okay.
I think you've stunned Ashim with
Yes,
the,
I know. This was
answer.
such a good answer that look what happened to Ashim.
Konstantin had a question.
Yeah, thank you. So I noticed one point that you mentioned at a given time. It was about fluent processing as a connection with understanding aesthetics. And the way of fluency, and which probably is connected to training, but what I'm interested in is, as a physicist, I know that symmetry is economy of rules. Yes, and the economy of rules translates into economy of processing, which means that symmetry translates into economy of energy. Therefore, it could be, along an evolutionary path, a connection between symmetry and minimizing the energy expended in order to process.
Okay, so I would say yes, it could be. And I don't know the answer to that question. Meaning whether there is a connection to why the brain devoted, circuitries to symmetry, to energy, or as I presented in my talk, that it is evolutionarily important because of biological reasons. I cannot tell. I cannot tell whether it's one or the other, or it could be both. But I think your point is well taken. I wish we could have a way to answer it. I mean, that is beyond the scope of my study, but it would be really cool to understand. I love those kind of questions, Konstantin. It's a very important question.
And then Anne had a question.
So I'm going to go more to the practical side of things. When you were talking, Norberto, about the emphasis, the issues for Loyola, at what stage are they in the development of addressing, and how does a person become involved in a collaborative to begin to address those questions? And if you could review the issues, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so, as David said on Sunday, actually not Monday, David, Sunday is my first year anniversary. So anyway, so far the main effort has been to engage the deans, and I started in this manner mostly because the deans know to a large degree what is going on in their schools, and so what we did is we meet once a week, and we discuss many things. But among the many things, one of the questions we have asked is, what are the urgent and complex social issues that we would have capacity at Loyola to tackle, and that are important to us, of course. And of course, there are many, right? There are many that we could be tackling, and we are not able to tackle everything. The deans we had a retreat, they formed a list of problems that they felt based on their faculty. And we have some priority in this list. So the first problem that we thought it was important to put in our midst is the issue of racism. And that's why we work towards creating this Institute for Racial Justice. One problem that is coming down the pipeline, and maybe our second effort, is the issue of violence. And by that is meant much more broadly than, I only put the violence for January 6th, the riots on the Capitol, but we think very broadly about this. We think issues related to law, issues related to domestic violence, to sexual violence, shootings in schools and so on. So we are really thinking not just what happened that day. So that is coming down the pipeline. Now, I mentioned my anniversary on Sunday because the next phase, what we would like to do is open up this to the entire community for discussion. What are the problems that we need to be tackling together. What are the problems for which we have strength across the university? Or maybe in some occasions, problems for which we will say, wow, if we had this or that other faculty to complement our strengths, we'll become really strong. So we are going to open up the conversation across the university. This year was a very strange year, and I don't have to tell you, right? We have too many things happening, and so we had to focus on certain problems, COVID being the most important thing of the year. But we intend now to open this conversation across the university, and this will come pretty soon. There will be an announcement, and you'll be able to participate fully on this process. But thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And of course, for everybody, you know, if you have interdisciplinary research ideas, that's what we do at Curl. So feel free to come and chat with one of us. Bill has a question.
It was probably more a comment than a question. I think that what you've done is underscored the importance of interdisciplinary work. I think by definition, the way we do our research at Curl has been, when I have community partners, they tend not to see it as a philosophical problem or a psychological problem. It's a problem that's invariably interdisciplinary, but it's also something over my 40 plus years of being in universities there's always been talk about interdisciplinarity, but looking at, you know, what really, you know, gets it going. But it's a major asset that universities have that is incredibly underutilized. And, you know, people stick to their own departments. And it's something that gets you excited. As a faculty member, I have to say in my whole career, it gets exciting when you can talk to folks in other departments, but also when you have community partners talking about various issues. So, and it's motivating the students. So I think it's this asset that I still think is underutilized, not tapped as much. And it sounds like you're really pushing it, which is excellent.
So Phil, I don't know if David had an opportunity to talk to some of you. I had a conversation earlier this week with David about this issue that you are raising. You know, to me, and please push back if you wish, to me, the important thing is not so much whether we are interdisciplinary or not. I think most research these days is to some degree interdisciplinary. You know, even if you work on biology, you might use, you know, mathematical modeling, or if you work in physics, you might use computer science, or there's a lot of interdisciplinary. To me, the important thing is the problems you are going to solve.
Right.
And I would say for Loyola to be compatible with our mission, we really need to solve the important problems that are facing the world, and that will make us unique. I mean, there are good researchers here, and we can each ask a question, right? So you choose the problem, and then you come back and say, okay, to tackle this problem, what would be the right combination of disciplines? What would be the right combination of tools and techniques and so on? So I mean it. I think it is important. And one of the things I said to David is that in my next announcement, we are going to send an announcement about the plans. There will be the formation of a new unit at the university dedicated to these problems and to transdisciplinary solutions to these problems. A unit that will actually work to maximize the potential by combining the expertise across the university, including Curl. So what you're saying is exactly right. You know, it's a buzzword, right? I mean, we can always say, oh, we are interdisciplinary. I think the important thing is not whether you are interdisciplinary. I think I have been very highly interdisciplinary, but the important thing to me was tackling blindness. So that was the question that drove us to work together. And then when I got older, I said, okay, I want to tackle the other difficult question, which is a more philosophical question, but that was the question. And then I said, what do I need in my team to tackle? So this is the importance, really. And I think if we could potentiate these collaborations, we can go very far. But always remembering that we need to help the world. That's our mission. Loyola is a university, as I put it in the mission of the university, dedicated to serve humanity. And so this is how we have to be thinking. This is my view about it.
I was going to say it's consistent. I in my various talks, I'd love to talk. I would reference sociology departments traditionally have had a course called social problems, and I said that's an orientation problem that it should be called social solutions, which is getting more at what you're talking about.
Well, I mean, to have a solution, you have to know the problem. So it's good. It's good that they have that. You know, you have to understand what the problems are before you have a solution.
Right.
And so this unit that I discussed with David earlier this week has entitled the work of solution. So, but they has entitled the work problems too. So both are important.
We have about 7 minutes left, and I've got 3 people who would like to jump in here. Bill, do you want to go next? And then Christine and Hector.
Thank you. I have a very narrowly focused question. I don't know if the answer will have broader implications. On your images with the red lines, where I thought the red line was supposed to reflect something about balance or symmetry, it was clearly not a midline. And I'm wondering what kept it from being sort of down the middle of what you were drawing.
I see. I was trying to think which one you are referring. No, this. So Bill, I'll tell you, and I'm not sure if it has relevance, but it's relevant to you, so I'll answer the question. We did different kinds of analysis, and again, the paper has a lot of other statistics, but that particular was to ask the question: if a painter were to balance an image, would it balance an image at every latitude, instead of just balance the image as a whole, or was it a balance that goes across the board? So that particular line was, is it balanced, say, at the first row, and is it balanced on the second row, or better still, the line is, where is the point of balance of the image in the first row? Where is the point of balance of the image in the second row? So the line was a little wiggly because it wasn't quite balanced exactly right in every latitude in the image. In spontaneous images, the one that was on the right, you can see it's very wiggly, and it's because sometimes some very important and colorful or light intense objects was one side, and then in another latitude it was in another side. But artists actually are careful. They just don't balance the image. They really balance almost the ones in the early Renaissance, which is what this image is about, really were balancing the images all across. They were careful at every height of the image to balance the line. That's why it looked like this. And it wasn't in the center because sometimes they didn't put it in the center. I don't know if I must. So we ask different questions. One is, do artists balance their paintings, and then are they careful in balancing throughout? And then do they put the balance right in the middle, or do they put the balance to a side, or things like this? There were lots of other issues in that painting.
I think I was thinking more about the image of you, where the line was definitely on one side of your nose, for example, not down the middle.
Unfortunately, I think I'm not a very symmetrical guy, Bill. I think I swear. I mean, I was posed exactly in the middle, but none of us is really fully symmetric. My nose is a little crooked to one side, and I don't know. My tie was, not quite straight or something. I guess I'm not symmetrical.
I think it's critical. Language matters here, and I think it's critical that we heard Norberto to say that he's not necessarily symmetrical all the time, but not that he said he was unbalanced. I think that's the thing. So I'm actually going to use the family holds back and put Christine after Hector. So Hector, please.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. So bom dia, doutor. Bom dia.
Bom dia, Hector.
Bom dia. I've lots to share. One is to reconsider how the Baroque aesthetic complicated the Renaissance painting and Penitentine's writing. And that's where Brazil, Mexico, Cuba, Spain, as an imperial power, because the Baroque aesthetic, which is the 17th century versus the 18th, which is more the Enlightenment, meaning more Northern European. That's very interesting way to speak about vision and visuality and visual ploy. So the text I would invite from a woman studies, gender studies perspective would be Michel Foucault and his essay on Las Meninas, which is a certain way, a way to rethink what you're doing, which is fascinating, and then bringing it to what's been happening in gender studies, in human sexuality studies from the 70s onward. The second thing I want to state is much more personal. Maybe Christine, David, and I think Yasmin will definitely know. I actually am legally blind in my right eye. I have two different color eyes, and I've suffered from retinal detachments. I hope it's in the past, but I have had 10 eye surgeries. So what you presented at the beginning of your presentation for me is actually can be life-changing because my right eye can see very little. And it's a very long story, but one day I hope I can share more because some of the experts at U of C and UIC have been helping me keep my eye as stable as possible because I don't want to lose my eye. But I'm very, very interested in how to tie in what you're doing, the use of technology, and what I do in some of my courses, which is on the Anthropocene, the transhumanism, and Android, how we humans are developing humanity through technology. So I just want to thank you again. Muito obrigado.
So Hector, so first of all, I'm sorry to hear about your right eye. Pains me to hear, but you know, maybe at some point, if we want to talk one-on-one, I can hear more about the details. And if I know anything, I can help you. If I don't know, I'll tell you. What we focus was really on one. The study focused on one disease, which I explained, what's retinitis pigmentosa. But I may know something about other diseases. So it depends a bit on what you have. The issue of the Baroque, the 2020 article, the one that was with Correa Herrán, the first author was Correa Herrán, actually is so the first article in 2017 focused on the early Renaissance, and there was a choice. We wanted to focus there, not to have too much variability. In the 2020 article, we asked the question, how these metrics vary across time. So we went from the early Renaissance and into the Baroque. So we actually look at that. And the findings to me were super interesting. One of the things, and I don't know if Konstantin is still here or Ashim, as a physicist, my formation initially was in physics, was that you know, I was very curious about transitions, you know, of styles across periods. And, you know, sometimes these transitions happen because of a historical event. So if you have a war, or if you have a discovery of photography, the styles will change because of the technical advance. But I was curious, since the models that I couldn't describe fully because of time were very nonlinear and very, they resemble a lot models in physics where particles interact. I was curious whether we would detect what is called in physics phase transitions. And to my surprise, we found phase transitions in art. And in part of what this is that when artists paint, it influences others automatically, because others will look and say, oh, this is an idea, maybe I should incorporate this, and they start changing. So there is an interaction between artists, and we notice in the Renaissance and into the Baroque two phase transitions. So if you're interested in the Baroque, that 2020 article by Correa Herrán is actually one. We did look at that because we were very curious. And thank you for bringing the Baroque. It's a dramatic change in art history, and of course we will look there. But at some point, Konstantin, I'd like to come and talk to you and show you phase transitions to see if you believe them.
I had promised Christine that she could talk, but it's 12:01. So what I'm going to do is say, Christine, we'll table your question for another time. Other than I want to note that Christine, as a woman of Greek descent, really did want to note that right away when you concluded that, as usual, the Greeks were right. So I just point that out there on her behalf.
What else, Christine? The Greeks were right, but I won't tell you the other things the Greeks were not right, so that I don't disappoint you. But Plato had some really good points, I have to say, and Aristotle too.
Thank you so much, Norberto. This was a fascinating, thought-provoking. I had the privilege, along with Hector, and Timon, and Constantine, of being on the search committee. And it's always good to see you again, Norberto, and glad that you're here with us and able to share your research and your insight. And I think we're all excited, certainly within the university, to see where we all might go together. One final thought on the question of problem solutions. I think one of the things that Curl has learned over the years is that our partners come to us able, willing, eager to say what their problems, what their issues are that they're facing, but also with solutions. And that one of the reasons we get so much credit at Curl for being interdisciplinary is because they allow us, they push us to say, here is the issue and here are the things we dream of. How can you bring in the resources of the university? So I think there's an interesting model here at Curl, of course, after 25 years. And I think it dovetails well, your comments and your vision for the university certainly dovetails well with ours. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend. I hope you enjoy your weekend.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.